So yeah, hello to everyone joining the meeting. Welcome along. So yes, this is the Green Register Twilight Talk today. Just so you know, you're all in the right place. Um, yeah, we'll just let everyone who's been waiting join in, which I think they have done now. But yeah, there'll inevitably be one or two people maybe just joining in the next few minutes. So yeah, I'll make a soft kind of housekeeping intro, and then we'll kick off with the main meat of the event in a few minutes' time. Um, so yeah, welcome along, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today's Green Register talk. This is one of our Twilight talks, which we run typically once a month, and are meant to be a bit shorter, a bit more focused than some of our other events, and a little bit more provocative, sort of ideas based, more about things, issues that are going on in the industry rather than technical training, as it were. But that's not to say you won't learn some useful technical things today. I think you certainly will, particularly with this topic. Um, so yeah, a little bit of an intro and housekeeping before we kick off. So yeah, today's event called Heat Pumps from Warts and All Experiences to Potential Solutions. Um, and yeah, delighted to have Matt Jones of Bristol City Council join us today to give his presentation around that topic, and then be on hand to help us all have a conversation around the issues this topic throws up. And I'm sure probably most of you on the call today are here because you've either worked with heat pumps, or you've got questions about them, or you've heard good things, or you've heard bad things. And yeah, always good to have a kind of range of questions and queries and thoughts around the subject. So and Matt is very used to this. He's been working in this field for a long time. And yeah, learning more and more as he does so, talking to lots of people. So yeah, he's very used to yeah, questions and queries and opinions on the matter. So yeah, I think we should have a really good conversation. Um, so yeah, a few details. So microphones, I think I can see. I think all of you have got your mute button on at the moment, which is great. Yeah, if I can generally ask you to keep that on, then it helps everyone else hear our speaker clearly. What we're going to do in terms of format is once I introduce Matt, he'll present for about 20 or 25 minutes. And we think probably in this format it's best to let him run through that, and then we'll have a Q&A session after that. So during his presentation, if you've got questions you're thinking about, do please post them in the chat in Zoom. So yeah, if you bring up the chat window at the bottom of your Zoom window, you should be able to just bring up. There's a little function to bring up the chat sidebar, and then once you've done that, you can post a question there, and then we can pick that up when we come to the appropriate point, or I can come to you and ask you to read out your question. In terms of video, feel free to leave your camera on or off as you wish, totally up to you. And if you've got any issues with the connection, if you're getting interruption, however, it can be useful to switch your video off just to lessen the bandwidth you're having to cope with. Right, I think that's all to say beforehand. So yeah, I will hand over to Matt Jones. Welcome along, Matt.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Just start the slideshow from my end. Tom, can you just confirm that's up as it should be?
That's all looking good. Thanks, Matt.
Grand. Okay, so yeah, I'm Matt from Bristol City Council. I work in the climate change team, and I've developed an unhealthy obsession with heat pumps in the last couple of years. Learned a lot, and hopefully sharing some of that learning with you this evening. The broad project that we've been working under has been called Optiheat. It's involved City Council, Bristol University, and included Nesta most recently as well. So I'm going to run through a bit of what we've learnt around heat pump deployment, and then crucially some key resources that we think will help you in your roles to overcome some of the challenges. So this journey started where a couple of years ago we were trying to install heat pumps at high density in the residential area. Very long story short, we found that people didn't want them in in as much density as we thought, and we wondered why. And then we started investigating some of the quality issues that people were flagging that was suppressing demand, we felt, due to poor public perception among some groups. So I'm going to jump straight into this and talk about the audit work we did and have been doing, which equates to nearly 100 audits, and that's audits going into homes, looking at heat pumps that have been installed, a mix of housing type from privately owned to social housing to new builds. And they follow 3 different stages, initially working with MCS, then on looking at our own social housing, and then latterly working in partnership with Nesta. Alongside the technical audits of heat pumps, we also interviewed residents along the way as well. So we've got both the quantum qual side of things. So to cut to the chase, of those installations, pretty much all of them had issues of some sort. And the typical issues ranged quite significantly, but common things were things like insulation and lagging done poorly, often, more often than not set up well, so not commissioned correctly, relatively poor handovers, building regulation kind of issues as well. And that's across all the property types and owner occupiers versus rented as well. There's no real difference there. I could show slides for a very long time, but you don't have to be a heat pump expert to realize that this looks a mess. And this is actually in a new build where, you know, the heat pump's not level, so it's going to wear down parts quicker. Lots of push fit kind of stuff that's going to fail sooner. And actually this particular property is a new build and was performing really badly, which a key point for today is that fabric isn't related to the performance of a heat pump. It might reduce the heat loss in some ways, but it doesn't affect the performance in terms of how efficient it is. And when I talk about efficiency, I'm talking about what's called the coefficient of performance, which is the amount of units energy out that the heat pump puts for every unit of energy in. So why that's important is because we have a high electric price, so you need about 3.5 units out to 1 in to be kind of gas comparative. So this kind of shows here that across all the installations, we saw an average SCOP, which is seasonal coefficient of performance, of 2.6 or 260%. And really to be comparative to gas, you would need that up at 300 to 350% or 3 to 3.5. Smart tariffs can change that a lot, but what we found and what we learned is that, you know, particularly in social housing, those tenants are less likely to be able to have the skills or the time to engage with time of use tariffs. You'll notice that I have drawn over this, but I can promise you that was the coefficient of performance in that particular install, which was a new build. So again, you know, we've seen passive houses with really poorly performing heat pumps at the same time. And this isn't a local issue to Bristol. We found evidence from elsewhere. There was an electrification of heat project run by government many years ago now, but they had an average performance of 2.8, and that was across 700 or more installations. So this is a nationwide issue. So first key point to note is that I'm flagging that if you're involved in heat pump delivery projects, unless you've got a really good heat pump engineer, it could well be that they're not installed well. So that's the doom and gloom, but we know that this isn't the fault of heat pumps. Heat pumps have been around since the 1800s, believe it or not. And it's not new technology, but it's newer to us in terms of using it for heating individual homes. And Octopus have shown recently that, some of their performance data from their systems, they're getting really good savings, and their installs tend to be at the cheaper end as well at the moment. So there's increasing evidence base there that heat pumps can perform really well when installed well and commissioned well and handed over well. So the next section, I'm going to take you through each stage of installation and just talk about the key things that we've learned and give you some of those key kind of suggestions about what you might do if you're at one of these stages or perhaps at the very start of delivering a heat pump project. So at pre-installation stage, what we found, I'm just going to rattle through these quite quickly, but we reflected that we thought that a reason why a lot of our installs weren't going well is because we didn't have organizational kind of knowledge about what good looks like to install a heat pump. We hadn't got a specific specification to outline what we expected as an authority. Lots of teams involved, no coherent approach there. We weren't using many tools that are out there that can really help the management of heat pump projects. And through all those audits, that most of them were MCS or Trustmark accredited installers, we knew that from that research that that wasn't a guarantee of having a good quality installer. In fact, far from it. So what we're recommending, if you're in a larger organization like a social housing provider, or it might just be a large consultancy or something, establish who's involved in delivering heat pump projects early and bring people together. Understand what the skills are, self-reflect. What do you know about heat pumps? Where have you learned that? Do you know enough to know what good looks like? Set up a working group within your organizations potentially. We found that's been really helpful for us. And undertake some heat pump training. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a gap in the training available, but I'll talk about what we did with the Green Register in a second. And find a good installer. Easier said than done, unfortunately. So we work with the Green Register to design our own non-technical heat pump training. This training doesn't exist anywhere in the UK. We spent a long time looking for it. But the aim there was to empower our teams to know what good looks like and to be able to effectively deliver projects. So we had a day in the classroom, and then we also had a site visit to look at one good and one bad heat pump installation. We got really good feedback from that. It was really practical. It was talking through some of our resources and practical tools. And I find, from my experience, heat pump training tends to be either the very basic introductory to what a heat pump is and how it works and stuff, which is kind of okay, but it doesn't really tell you what good looks like, or it's kind of at the other end, which is the technical installation stuff. There's a big gap in this middle space for people like us really to be delivering these projects, and we have a big role to play in that outcome generation. So key takeaways here: MCS and Trustmark do not equal a happy heat pump. That's really important to know. There are changes afoot in MCS, but even still, they don't do things like minimum performance guarantees and lots of areas there's still gaps. But other things, take responsibility for your own learning. Obviously, you are doing that being here today. But really, I knew nothing about heat pumps really 2 years ago. I know a bit now, but still learning every day. It's really important that you do that, because nobody's telling you necessarily what you need to know. It's important to understand your own competencies as your organization. I've seen that a lot of things that come through from, say, M&E consultants, maybe got more experience in gas heating systems and less on heat pumps for sure. Build strong relations internally if you're going to bring about change as well, and invest in understanding how to find the best installers. So Heat Geek installers are a pretty good starting place, or people who've done certain training like Warmer Academy training, for example. There's other training also available, but there's no easy way to find out who a good installer is. So the next stage of delivery is design. So just go through what we've learned at the design stage. So again, lack of specification about what we expect from a design. When we do get the designs, they're often poor, and we know that a poor system design leads to a poor quality install. There's a lot of lack of skills really amongst delivery teams to check those designs. Again, if we don't know what we're looking for, how can we spot something that's going to be an issue? And yeah, as I said, M&E consultants from the designs I've seen, sorry to tar them with all the same brush, but there is a skills gap there because I'm seeing systems really badly designed from that group, unfortunately. And there's often a lack of proper heat loss calculations to size heat pumps correctly, particularly in new builds where MCS doesn't necessarily apply. So this is just one example. As you can see, I've highlighted here that this is just part of the design that's delivered. This is in a fuel poor home, and they've said that they're designing to a SCOP of 2.6. So if you remember, you need about 3.5 to get to gas parity. So this design is actually leading to somebody potentially increasing their bills, and that's designed in from the start with a relatively high flow temperature of 50 degrees C as well. So this is what we're just seeing very regularly. And this is the outcome on this particular design. You won't be able to see that clearly from the images, but the heat pump wasn't level, so we told them to go and re-level it, and then they just put a bolt and a washer and screwed it up from there, which was terrible. And the condensate pipe, which is supposed to go to a soakaway or a proper drain, was just jammed into the mud. So recommended actions for this phase. Have a look at what your existing specifications are or employer requirements. We've got examples of those which you can share as well. It's really important to monitor the implementation of the specification. It's not enough just to give it. You've got to make sure that you've got KPIs around that to check. And seek expert advice to check designs alongside building internal skills. So it's really important people are able to look at designs and check them. This is a really excellent document that Carbon Trust, with collaboration and input from us and the university, have put together, which is the first starting point really as a guide to delivering action. So it runs through basically step by step what you need to decide, what you need to know to make that decision, and what your choices are, and things that you can literally copy and paste out. So, if you want to put a minimum SCOP for installation, you can put that in there and guidance around what that should be. So Tom will link to the resources on a website we created where you can use that document as well. Furthermore, it's not enough just to, as I say, put things in place. This is an example of our kind of like data logging spreadsheet, and what I noticed was some oversized heat pumps in red, as I highlighted here. So even though we were designing with a lot more kind of criteria, we still got issues if installers aren't following that guidance exactly. And then, where to get expert advice. I'd say if they're Heat Geek or Warmer Academy trained, that's a good start. They're two leading trainers in this field. Manufacturers can be a good help. They're quite vested in making sure heat pumps are installed well. They're also free usually to come and look at a design or check something or whatever. And then lastly, asking installers to use consistent design tools. So there's loads of good tools like Spruce, the heat loss design tools and system design tools. So it makes it easier for you to look and check designs that are coming through. So key takeaways: guidance and specification are critical, and we need skills amongst all of us, not just the installers. Installation phase. So as I kind of talked briefly about the audit results on average, and I will say on average because there's some amazing installers out there, luckily, particularly in Bristol, we've got some good installers. There's a lack of competency, and the training that they're getting is not getting them to the stage they need to be consistently delivering good outcomes in homes. We've seen poor design, but also really sloppy implementation, where something is designed okay, but lagging's hanging off, there's heat loss through the pipes, it's not level, etc. New builds is particularly problematic because there's a big disjoint between the time when it gets put in and then the tenant moves in our case, or an owner occupier perhaps, and the person that's left to do the handover is not necessarily the one with the skills to do that properly. No monitoring. Monitoring is critical. I'll talk more about that. But if you don't monitor the system, how it's working, it's difficult to evaluate the outcome for the home. So our recommended actions, we've designed and created a non-technical 5-point checklist. One takeaway from today, if you're thinking you want to upskill about heat pumps, go and look at a neighbour's, a friend's, or whatever heat pump and take this form. You don't have to know anything about heat pumps to use it, and it'll help you give a quick check assessment of whether that heat pump's working well and installed well. Again, that's on the Opti website. Monitoring is critical. That'll tell us things like the SCOP, how it's performing, how much energy it's using, etc. You can use onboard monitoring of the devices, or you can install third-party monitoring at an additional cost. And we've designed a self-auditing form as well, where for installers, we'll ask them to complete an audit form, sort of, I think, a very light touch of what Passive House does, where you get pictures or whatever throughout the stages of delivery and evidence that it's been done properly. So yeah, within that 5-point checklist form, it's really hand-holdy, so it has like guidance about exactly how to say get information off the main brands of controls and things like that. So key takeaways. Yeah, use these tools, use the resources on the website to upskill yourselves. Hands-on learning is by far the best. Speak to people, go and look in homes, poke around, be nosy as best you can. Monitoring is essential, and if you pick up things at audit stage, then that can solve problems whilst they're still on the site. So the last section is post-installation. Handover, as I mentioned, is really often poor and not tailored to residents at all. It's done quickly. We definitely need to put more time and effort into that than is currently done on average. The technical audits, the full technical audit, so beyond the 5-point checklist, we've designed an audit form for that, which again is available on the website, which picks up all the key MCS stuff, plus a framework to capture outcomes in terms of performance of that system, has key settings being put in place like weather compensation, etc. There's, again, skills gaps among support officers who may be like housing officers, for example, who are given the job to hand over and advise tenants on these systems when they don't have the knowledge themselves. Maintenance service teams, often can't keep up with all the different brands of heat pumps that are put in. It's tricky for them to keep on top of their skills and learnings about these systems. And we have had disputes with contractors, which if you didn't have monitoring in place, are difficult to resolve. So recommended actions, if you've got a handover, review it. We've got examples of hopefully half decent handovers and key information that you can use. Mandate that technical audits are done as standard on the sample of installations to check the quality of the install. Review how these systems are being maintaining, and use the opportunity when they do get service to maybe check in with the resident to make sure they're all still know how to work the system, and then mandate monitoring on all installs. So this is our technical audit form. As I mentioned, it's got a form where you can complete it on your phone or a tablet as well. You can design your own form. We've set it up so there's instructions there to just use Google Forms. There's also a form there that we've been using where we've had repairs done to capture what repairs have been done and the changes, like commissioning settings that have been changed as well. So again, I won't go through all these. I haven't got time to do that in detail now, but they are there should you wish to use them, which I strongly recommend if you're not auditing any of your installations as is. monitoring. So we've created a guide with the university on how to implement remote monitoring, which we're actually trying to rename as remote assistance, because monitoring sounds a bit big brotherish, whereas remote assistance, I think, is much more amenable to the general public. So we've reviewed what monitoring is available on most systems and what features that has, etc. So key takeaways, technical audit is a really valuable learning opportunity. Go and shadow some of those, you'll learn a lot. Handover is a skill in itself and needs resources, and it's not just a one and done thing. You need to have somebody available to answer ongoing queries, particularly if they're installed in the summer where they're not really using the heating system. And monitoring is vital. So a couple of last slides. So this is the website. It is very much not a polished thing. This is just our resources are all caveated. We created these resources because they didn't exist out there already. So we're hoping that you'll find some use in some of those documents. There's a long list of things from end-to-end process that hopefully will be of use. And this is just an overview of what we've now implemented in terms of our overall quality assurance process from start to finish. So at each of these design stages, we've got kind of things that we're implementing, from audits to using our specifications, etc., and checking on an ongoing basis. So it's not perfect. There's still challenges within this, but we think that it's a good start in getting better outcomes for heat pumps going into particularly fuel poor and vulnerable homes. So that's all my slides. So maybe if I stop sharing, I can see if anybody's got questions and things have come back. Right.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Matt. Yeah, there's been a couple of things that have come in that I've posted links to. But yeah, do well, one question that's just come in. But yeah, do anyone else who's for whom this has raised some questions, do please type away or stick a hand up, and I'll come round to you. But maybe, yeah, if I could just kick off with one to sort of get us going. Obviously, inevitably there was some technical terms and organisations you named in the presentation, Matt, and someone already asked about SCOP, which I hope firstly I hope I've answered correctly, that a SCOP of between 3 and 4 is kind of what we should be aiming for. Is that?
Yeah, I mean,
what you'd say?
broadly, I guess there's factors that can determine how important that efficiency is. So if you remove gas from a home, so if it's a gas hob and replace it with an induction hob, we know that can save about £120 a year. So that can help bring the bill down if you do that. If you're on a heat pump specific tariff, that can significantly change the game. Obviously, supplemented with solar and battery as well, that can change things. And some people might choose to change, say, less radiators for a lower performing system because it might mean less disruption. And they might plan to have a battery alongside that and mitigate not having bigger heat emitting areas due to smaller radiators with accessing cheaper electricity. So it's important to make sure that there's two ways to skin a cat. You can have, a really super designed system with big radiators or underfloor or whatever, or you can seek to get your savings through time of use, or of course both. But the former does come with more cost if you're going to change more systems in a retrofit. Of course, if you're dealing with new build, you should have every ample opportunity to have a really high performing system.
Great. Okay. I might just come to the middle of those three questions first, because it is also about SCOP. So yeah, Joanna Price saying, is the SCOP of a system available to see on screen, or is it measured data needed to establish it?
Yeah, so in the guide that we've put together on the website around the 5-point checklist, it handholds you how to measure to view that off controllers. There's a range of different controllers, but it should handhold you through. If not, YouTube will have the answer. So most controllers on most modern heat pumps, it should be able to be seen. I'd argue that like in a car, it should be MPG right up front and center, because it is an important metric that's easy to get a sense of how well the systems work. Unfortunately, and cynically, I would say, it's somewhat buried in menus sometimes on some controllers, unfortunately.
Okay, so yeah, a bit like trying to understand, the gas central heating controller. Not always completely straightforward, but it's there. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
cool. Okay, brilliant. Um, okay, so yeah, I might just come to that back to that first question now then. So from Stephen Lampard, um, yeah, saying interesting if somewhat depressing run through of the fact that there are many heat pump installations and design problems. Um, yeah, could you just like reiterate some of those key installation and design, your top five installation design errors or
Um,
problems?
so design wise, oversizing tends to be the most common thing, where the tools that are used to do heat loss calculations are too generous, really. And we know now from measured heat loss assessments that actually there's a huge gap between what the MCS design tool standard and things like air tightness assumptions are versus what they are in practice. So in my own home, which is a 180 square meter, 5-bed listed old wreck of a building with single glazed, immediately somebody would assume, oh, you need a 3-phase connection for that. You need a massive a heat pump would never work. Whereas we did a measured test, and actually the heat loss was 9.3 kilowatts, which to put in context, I've seen an M&E consultant specify an 11 kilowatt heat pump on a 2-bed new build. So that's one area. Design often, do you know what? Often there hasn't been a good system design. It's at all. It's just we're going to put something in, design it like a gas boiler, and hope it works, particularly in new builds. So there are a couple of design things, and then on the installation side, the biggest thing is commissioning settings. That's the biggest thing, where they're just not set up properly. They're not set up on water schedules properly. Weather compensation is not set up yet. Tom, one thing to find is that there's just been a report released from the Commission on Fuel Poverty with the Carbon Trust, who we've worked closely with and included some interviews with households in Bristol. And one of their findings was that one of the biggest issues is commissioning settings not being put in place, and that could be the difference between 50% of your energy bill just because it's not set up well. And then sloppiness, insulation, outdoor insulation, the wrong type of insulation, poorly applied, is going to get soggy and cause a significant increase in bills as a result. So poor workmanship, not the right materials on that front. So there'd be I don't know if that's 5, but
Well, that's a very good list. And so yeah, so kind of skills, largely skills related, whether that's design skills or
Yeah.
installation skills. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, well, if we come down to our next question, then yeah. So Amy Starr saying, could you tell us about the different projects mentioned in your first slides, your sort of audit slides? Mentions MCS and an airport road.
So the MCS sample was essentially a mix of mostly only owner occupiers in Bristol. Some newer installs, some older installs. We did that as a bit of a pilot, just sort of like a friends and family who we know. Do we know anybody who wouldn't mind us auditing their heat pump? MCS actually did the audits themselves because we were working in partnership a little bit for a previous project.
And could you just clarify who MCS are, just for those who don't know?
Yeah, so they're the body that set the standards for renewable installations on grant schemes. So whether it be heat pumps, solar PV, etc. So they're supposed to be, if you're accredited under MCS, that's supposed to be a denoter of quality of installation. And then the certification bodies are supposed to be the ones that go out and check that that work has been delivered to that standard. So they often get off lightly, in my view, because everybody blames MCS for poor quality installs, where it's the certification bodies that are supposed to be checking as well. And then the airport road sample was all new builds in Bristol that were installed not very well by the contractor, and then we went back and audited those. In those instances and onwards from there, we had HeatGeek trained local installers who came and audited those in partnership with us. So we knew we could trust their skills do that.
Great. So yeah, a big learning curve for installation. And as you say, like you've been at the sharp end of yeah, having to realize what's not working and how to improve it. Which is great to share all that. Um, right, next question from Tony Caravan. Yeah, do the same monitoring processes and SCOPs apply if it works in reverse for cooling?
Ooh, good. Well, I mean, it's kind of worms. And I'm actually looking at this for my house because I'm going to get a heat pump installed this year as well. In fact, the parish council are coming around in 25 minutes to come and have their say. So heat pump for cooling, yes, you can do it, but from my learning to date, don't hold me to this. You have to set the cooling at no less than dew point so that the pipes don't you don't get moisture build up on the pipes and therefore leaking into your underfloors and your cupboards and that sort of thing, unless you've fully insulated all the pipework so you don't get that temperature difference. So I don't think it's really well known what the efficiencies for cooling are, to be quite honest. I mean, the dew point, I think, has been maybe around 16 to 17, 18, because we've got high humidity. Or this is what I read from other people who are trying this. But generally, unless you've got underfloor heating and or you've got fan coil radiators that are kind of got blowers on them as well, apparently it doesn't really work that well for cooling on an air to water system. I'm talking about, so air source water, unless you have that kind of setup. Generally, it's going to be much more effective to have air conditioning or air to air heat pumps, because air conditioning is just a heat pump, and just get a couple of units there instead, because until recently they were quite low cost install, and now there's a big demand and they're probably going to go up a bit. But yeah, I think if you're getting a new system installed, then it's worth considering having fan coil units that can blow air as well. But really, it's a big investment anyway, and you might just consider putting air to air alongside it.
Great, thank you. Then yeah, a couple of questions from Joanna Price saying, yeah, are push fit pipe fittings definitely not recommended? Is the first one. And then yeah, weather compensation. Does this require an outdoor thermometer, and is it automatically part of every kit?
Okay. I think the amount of push fit that's in that photo is not recommended, because I think there's just more chance of failure. We should be really a good installer. We'd be bending pipes, less materials as well, environmentally better if you're not using lots of points. Push fit is used, I understand, even by good installers occasionally, but I think the good installers tend to not use it very much for those reasons. And then, sorry, something about weather compensation, Tom?
Yeah, is it
Oh, a sensor,
sort of
yeah.
what is it essentially, and is it always part of the kit?
Yeah, so yes, so it's a sensor that sits either behind the heat pump or up to be mounted externally, not on a south-facing wall or fence or whatever, so it doesn't get the sunlight interference. And yeah, it does. Those sensors do come as standard, but setting it up, again, that fuel poverty study found that some heat pumps have it automatically set, but most don't. So you need to have a good installer that knows how to set that curve. And if you didn't know, weather compensation is the flow temperature of the water running through the system in relation to the outdoor temperature. Because if it's kind of quite mild outside, you don't need as much heat going through your radiators to meet your thermostat setting points. But when it's really cold outside, you need a higher temperature to meet that same set point. So essentially, because heating up water takes a lot of energy, if you can heat water up to a lower level or just the level it's needed, then that's where you get your efficiencies from a heat pump system.
Great, thank you. Then yeah, the next question from, excuse me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Roos Bar. What guidance is given to tenants on how to operate a heat pump system?
You'll see on our website there's some example handover stuff. So I guess we're still working on that, to be honest. We work with an organisation called CSE, Centre for Sustainable Energy, locally, who offer a tenant advice service. They're really good and knowledgeable at heat pumps and how to support people. They have a tenant advice service that they offer out nationally as well. I believe, I don't know if it's still the case, but a couple of months ago, they did have an offer that was available to at least local authorities who wanted to develop some handover guidance for those with tenants and heat pump systems. I think it's funded through the Energy Redress Scheme or something like that. So they have a whole website of really good resources on handover. But yeah, there's two parts to that. There's like the technical details, how to use the system, and then secondly, just some conceptual stuff. Like we sort of made a little diagram to show somebody touching a radiator to say, well, if your hand's 37 degrees and you're touching a radiator that's 35 degrees, it's going to feel cold. But that 35 degrees is still putting heat into the room. So do check your thermostat if you're worried about your heat pump not working, because that's one of the key issues we have, that people think the heating's not working because the radiators do, with weather compensation, they will drop down. But still, of course, heat the home.
Mm. And yeah, so that general change of people getting used to the idea, or the difference between hot water radiators, which tend to be, or running for gas boiler, which tend to be very hot, and a radiator running for heat pump, which is going to be cooler, but as you say, still giving out enough heat.
Yeah, it can be hotter on occasion. You know, if it's really cold and you've got high heat loss, it might be up at like 55 degrees flow, which is going to feel hot. But we have found that on some of our really old systems we've got on the council estate, they are on fixed flow temperatures, which is not advised. But the very old systems that have pretty poor controls anyway, and you know, a decision was taken rightly or wrongly that those homes might have issues if weather compensation was enabled. But we are reviewing that.
Great. And this is when you're referring to the website, Matt, you mean the OptiHeat website, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Then yeah, I guess a question from Gary Cunningham saying, yeah, did you publish a case study on your own home? Historic building, 5-bed house, single glazed windows. I guess you haven't done this yet.
Not done yet. Well, fingers crossed that because it's a listed building, I should have said, because
but if someone's looking for something like that, a sort of case study.
So I know that Heritage, is it, I get mixed between Heritage and Historic, I think it's Heritage England, have actually did a study on heat pumps and looked at a lot of installations, and that was a good piece of work because it debunked a lot of the myths. You know, they were working in old, not that well insulated buildings. People were having good experiences with them on average. So there are case studies out there. But I would say have a look at the Heat Pump Monitor website as well, because you can filter by solid stone on that as well. And yeah, there was a little, there is somewhere maybe on LinkedIn or on a website called Build Test Solutions, who I did my measured test with. So that involved putting sensors around the home, measuring the heat input, and then doing a heat transfer coefficient calculation, which I won't go into, but it gives you an actual heat loss rather than an estimated one from guessing what, you know, the U value of a 600 mil historic wall is, which in my case could be solid, it could be half full of rubbish, who knows. So if you're in doubt and you're like, say, an architect working on old buildings, those tests are just worth their weight in gold, because what they'll probably tell you is actually you can fit a heat pump in and not have a freeze case connection if you're concerned about the heat loss. And air tightness is really good as well, because that's often over-egged and can have a big difference on the size of heat pump you require. And every kilowatt extra of heat pump size you need on average is about 500 quid more. So it's quite a big saving if you can step down a heat pump size on the cost of an installation.
Fantastic. Yeah. So that importance of the knowing what you're dealing with first, getting a good survey of how's the existing property coping, what sort of energy does it need to heat it, and so you're making sure you're getting the right kit. Yeah. Fantastic. So a question from Simon saying, yeah, are you investigating air-to-air heat pumps? Having had one for 12 years in our own home, I could not recommend them more highly. Instant heat's directed down to the floor at human level rather than convecting up to the ceilings. In the recent extreme heat, they can also be used in reverse to supply cooling, air conditioning, and dehumidifying. So yeah, following that previous question, the recent Dakin systems have 5 internal units for 1 external. The only shortfall is hot water, but you can gain hugely by using a thermal store. They seem to be the norm in Europe.
Yeah, so I would say air-to-air heat pumps are a good option in a lot of cases. Obviously, in retrofit, we should be trying to use that existing wet heat system as much as we can, really. But particularly in prior electric homes like storage heaters, where they've got no wet heating system, air to air, I think, is a really good option. There's a good paper by a guy called John Eubank recently on the Nesta website with some recommendations about and learning around air to air. The hypothesis as well is that in low income homes, the intermittent use of heating and air to air might be lower bills than, say, if they did the same with an air to water heat pump, which in general prefer to be run low and slow, like constantly on, but using a very low amount of energy. Whereas if you switch it on and off, it's not going to work as well for various reasons. So yes, absolutely, and it would be considered in our offerings. And of course, you've got the cooling potential option, although I think that would be for us a big organizational decision, because I think we probably need to put solar panels on because you risk increasing bills, unfortunately, in the summer if people are using that a lot. So yeah, certainly. And there are now lots of options for hot water alongside air to air. So you get cylinders that have got integrated heat pump with them. However, I understand that on some of those, there can be very long recycling times to replenish the tank. So, but there are options there to do it.
Fantastic. So other questions, yeah, coming in. Yeah, could you describe the heat pump? Sorry, question from Joanna Price. What training the Bristol City Council in-house plumbers or heating engineers get, or do you have in-house people actually?
Yeah, we do. So we have maintenance people.
Hmm.
They don't install heat pumps, but they maintain them. They'll have done the manufacturer training usually, which is a bit limited, to be honest. I would say it's not necessarily about design. By chance, actually, tomorrow we're all going to Portishead to Warmer Academy training, which comes highly recommended by good installers that I know. So some of them are going to do that as well. And yeah, I'd love them all to have done like heat geek training as well. So yeah, there could be.
Excellent. Sounds like Joanna's interested in in the session. So, uh, yes, if there's still room, or maybe a future session, Joanna. Um, Great. Then yeah, David McCullough saying, do you have any recommended brands?
We can't really recommend brands. um,
There.
um, I think, in all honesty, with the modern heat pumps, I think there's not like a wild disparity between how good each individual brand is. I would be looking for things like parts availability, which I believe does vary across different brands. So think about that carefully. If you've got a heating emergency, can you get that part? We should really environmentally be using R290 heat pumps, which is one of the newer refrigerants. There's other ones that are going to come forward that have a lower global warming potential as well. So, and they can get to higher temperatures more efficiently as well if you had a higher heat loss home, and a bit more efficient doing hot water as a result. But yeah, I think ones that have good monitoring built in is something you want to look for as well. Yeah, so that's what I could say about those.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Interrogating the sort of added benefits, what they come with. Yeah. And then yeah, to zoom out. Yeah. So question from Stephen Lampart saying, yeah, just reiterate. Could you reiterate the general case for heat pumps versus gas boilers? Other than theoretical carbon savings, what are the headline pros and cons?
So I guess beyond carbon savings, which is obviously a major driver for us as a trying to reach those targets, users and people we've spoken to often report a much more comfortable heat, which doesn't really get talked about in heat pumps. But because it's on low and slow rather than on off of a gas boiler or oil boiler or whatever, actually people for the similar amount of running costs on average are getting a much more comfortable home, and that can be beneficial, I think. And we plenty of fabric experts probably on this call. You know, that's much more beneficial, I think, for fabric as well, having constant heat and reducing risk of mold and damp growth through intermittent heating. A lot more controllability, a lot more flexibility. So actually, our grid is going to become massively flexible because it has to utilize renewables. So you can't flex a gas boiler. You can't switch it on and off at different times, like you can do a heat pump in the same. There's no a heat pump. You can warm up the thermal fabric of the home and do that at a price that's cheap. Whereas gas is just one price, which is obviously quite cheap at the moment relative to electric, but electricity prices fluctuating works well with heat pumps. So there's that's a benefit, and we'll see that coming more and more. And you've obviously got a hot water tank as well as standard alongside it, which is another thermal store, which again, there will be times on the grid where you can get free energy in the future. You can do that now occasionally, but that'll be more and more common, particularly as we get more renewables and got on a windy, sunny day in summer, they're going to be giving away free energy because they need to.
Fantastic. And then yeah, in terms of that sort of comfort level, yeah, I've certainly heard people saying anecdotally the heat that you get from heat pumps can feel more comfortable because it's more sort of constant. Is there anything sort of around that you've found from your work, Matt?
That it's what, sorry, more
Sort of more comfortable constant heat compared to
yeah,
say
absolutely. That's what I was just saying. Yeah, people, better. I think there's some talk about like health outcomes related to that as well. I don't know all that, but I think the logic does suggest that that's something that could be beneficial.
Great. Then yeah, question from Amy Speed saying, would having an oversized pump negatively impact its ability to heat a space, or does it just mean costs are
Yeah.
higher?
So the best, I don't know why I always default to car analogies when I'm describing heat pumps, but so imagine a Ferrari to do the school run, right? It's an oversized engine. It's not meant like a little mini to go and do small local little journeys. It's going to be over revving, and essentially when it over revs, imagine the force that it takes to push a swing. You've got your kid on the swing, right? It takes a lot of force to get that set off, and that's a big amount of energy. But once it's going, you can literally touch your finger and keep the swing going, right? And that's the best analogy for how a heat pump works. To start up, it requires a lot of energy, but then it's just ticking over. And if you have a big heat pump, it means that it can't run at those really low speeds that it might need to meet a lower heat requirement. So it switches on and off rather than just sort of modulating, it's called. So that's the kind of best description. However, I think some data does suggest that a bit of oversizing, not necessarily a bad thing. And one thing to bear in mind is that if you're in a new build or a low heat loss home, actually you might have a smaller heat pump, but that might take therefore longer to do your hot water cycle because a smaller output of heat pump will take longer than a bigger engine heat pump, essentially, to heat up your hot water.
Presumably, yeah, that would be that would be linked to what sort of hot water storage cylinder you've got, Matt, and how big that was and that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah, to some extent, yeah.
Yeah, great. Brilliant. Well, yeah, a lot of different angles covered there, which is fantastic to see. And I think really benefit from this being a safe space to ask whatever, because very aware that particularly in a field like this, everyone's knowledge is at very different levels and people are coming from different angles. So yeah, really nice. I'm sure lots of the questions that were asked, a lot of the rest of you also had. So that's also really useful. Yeah, does anyone have any final questions before we wrap up? Because yeah, we do need to finish sharp at 6. Uh, yeah, do please raise a hand or post in the chat if you do. Um, if I whilst I'm just giving you a couple more minutes, if there's anything else that comes to mind, I'll just do a quick plug for other things we've got coming up. So yeah, as you may or may not know, we run lots of training events at the Green Register. And these are a mixture of events like this, which are more around issues and more discussive, and then more sort of technical training, which tends to be during work hours. We, as always, sort of over the summer holidays, we don't run events because most of you are taking a well-earned break and are off doing other things. So we've got a couple more events this week before the summer break. One on we've got a tour, actually a site visit of a low energy home near Bath, which is tomorrow towards the end of the day. Again, do just look at our website for details of all of these. And then the following day, we've got a talk on the Future Homes Standard. Recent piece of legislation which is going to have an effect on anyone designing new homes. So yeah, that'll give you a good rundown of the highlights of the legislation. And then starting from September again, there are always new talks coming through, but we've already got some of our more popular technical training courses lined up. So a series on ventilation, going into the different kinds of ventilation, pros and cons and things to think about, and a series about retrofitting traditional buildings, which again, relevant to a lot of you, I'm sure, on the call today. So do please keep checking back on the website for details of those. Good to see a lot of you have enjoyed the talk. Lots of good messages coming through. I think there might be one or two final questions buried in there. Hang on.
There's one on fabric and heat pump performance. Not specifically, but look up the work that's been done around the concept of fabric fifth. Also, Cero in Wales have done some work around that, and that balance between and don't get me wrong, not anti-fabric, but do the easier, less disruptive, less expensive fabric first. So do your loft, do your drafts and stuff like that, and maybe your underfloor if that's easy to get to. But EWI, IWI, and those really expensive things, they just won't pay back compared to an efficient heat pump system, unfortunately.
Yeah, so some other good resources. Actually, I'll post a couple of quick links before we close the call as well, around exactly what Matt's just been saying. Some sort of retrofit guidance documents which talk about the sort of hierarchy of the things that are more affordable and easier, and then staircasing up through the things that are ideal but a bit more expensive or a bit more involved, a bit more disruptive. So yeah, good to get your heads around that.
I see Robert's got his hand up if he's got a
thank you, well spotted question. Yes, Robert, please come in.
I've got a rapid question. Having installed an air source heat pump in our home, semi-detached property, built in the sort of 1880s, 1890s, back in the day. So that was installed in January 2025, and it was, fits in with the aim of creating a house which is now fully electric, no gas. The installation made no impact whatsoever. This wasn't the primary driver, but I think it's a consideration. The air source heat pump made no difference whatsoever to the EPC. And that doesn't quite feel right to me.
No, there is EPC reform going. EPCs are stupid when you put a heat pump on and it actually can make your heat even less good. So there is going to be reform around EPCs because they're not a great tool. I think most people would agree.
Slightly sort of blunt instrument, I guess,
yes.
the EPCs, can give kind of general advice to people, but actually if you want a really good assessment of what's best to do in your home, having a specialist come and do a survey, someone like Build Test Solutions that Matt mentioned, is probably a better use of money.
Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic. Right. Well, if I can just thank Matt again for a fantastic talk. As I'm sure you can all tell, he's knowledgeable and passionate about this area, and trying to move things forward, which is always really great to see. So thank you, Matt. And yeah, thank all of you for joining. As I say, these events are really made by everyone. Yeah, giving asking a range of questions and hopefully, yeah, benefiting from everyone else's answers. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and yeah, hope to see some of you again on other talks.
Thanks all. Thanks for coming.